Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back to another video from You Look Okay to Me. Today is Sickle Cell Awareness Day and I got approached by someone to collaborate and make a video for it, so here it is. So I guess before actually going into the video, maybe a bit of backstory on what sickle cell actually is. Sickle cell disease is the name of a group of inherited conditions that impact the red blood cells, with the most serious being sickle cell anemia. It mainly impacts people of African ancestry. So with someone that doesn't have sickle cell anemia, your blood cells are shaped round and are very flexible. So that means they're able to pass through the blood vessels very easily. But with someone with sickle cell anemia, the blood cells are shaped sickled or like half moons, which means that when they pass through the blood vessels, they don't pass easily, they sometimes get stuck, and it can cause a lack of oxygen or blood flow in the body, which can be extremely painful. But I don't have sickle cell, so I'm not the best person to tell you about the effects on the body and how it feels and the stereotypes around that. There's someone else that's better than me. Her name is Dee, or Dialectic Dee, which is her artist name. She's a poet, an amazing poet I might add, and she's been living with sickle cell since she was born, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk to her about what it's like living with the disease.
Hi, I'm Dee. Thank you for having me. I'm a spoken word artist and I also live with sickle cell anemia.
I want to know what sickle cell actually feels like. How does it affect the day-to-day?
I tend to get a lot of pain in my joints, so sometimes I can go through like episodes of pain, which can vary in different places around the body. So sometimes I'll get like a crisis, which is like a prolonged episode of pain, and that can be like in my chest, in my legs, in my hands, in my feet, like pretty much anywhere around the body, but I tend to get mine like in my chest. If I get like dehydrated, that can kind of trigger a crisis. Stress also can trigger a crisis. Unbalanced and unhealthy diet can trigger a crisis. If I have a lack of sleep, that can also trigger a crisis, and also like a change in weather. So sometimes when it's kind of rainy or cold, that can trigger a crisis, but also if it's too hot, that can also trigger a crisis. It's quite a difficult thing to kind of manage because, you know, you can't really control your environment. So anything in your surrounding environment can kind of trigger you, I guess. On a day-to-day, sometimes I can feel really fatigued and like low energy. And also I can just feel really low in mood sometimes. And I feel like recently it's been having more of an impact on my mood than usual. But like I said, it can just be due to the weather or like the pandemic in a way.
So as someone who creates creative work as well, I know very well how much a chronic illness can impact your artist practice and the work that you want to create. How does sickle cell impact your work?
I would say it's really difficult because sometimes in my artistry, like it can trigger me to get stressed. For instance, if I have a commission or a deadline, that can kind of trigger me, I guess, physically as well, if that makes sense. Because mentally it'll play on my mind, like, okay, I need to reach this deadline, or you know, and that can kind of play on my body in a way. And also just physically, it can be really difficult. So a lot of the time I have to travel to go to open mics or, you know, go to events. And sometimes that can also have an effect on my body. And I guess just like coming home late and stuff like that, it doesn't really help in terms of like my energy levels, because I'll be tired a lot of the time due to performing so much. So it's like trying to find that balance and I guess just work it out.
To escape this thing called sickle cell disease, a lack of hemoglobin protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout the body. For he lives inside of me.
I've written a few poems about sickle cell. In a way, more recently, I would say that I've been speaking about it more in my art. But usually I feel like people don't really know that I live with sickle cell because I'm quite just a happy, bubbly person. And I try not to let it get in the way of how I choose to kind of live my everyday life. So yeah, but I definitely want to start talking about it more within what I do.
So as with many chronic illnesses, sometimes you get stereotypes that can be associated with your illness. So some people might call you lazy or not really motivated. In some cases, they might call you a drug seeker. Are there any stereotypes that come with sickle cell?
A lot of the time, I guess, because people with sickle cell have to take really strong medicines to kind of combat the pain, a lot of the time we're kind of seen as drug seekers. Because sometimes we'll ask for opioids, which could be things like morphine or codeine, which tend to be the stronger drugs. And I feel like a lot of the time, you know, we're kind of looked down upon because of that. Also, it is a predominantly ethnic kind of condition. So because of that, I feel like there's a lot of racial kind of stereotypes attached to sickle cell. And I guess like, yeah, I feel like sometimes you can be seen as people who are just a bit lazy if we're like too tired to come out or too tired to do anything, or sometimes we're not really believed when we say that we're in a lot of pain. Most sickle cell sufferers still have to pay for their medications, even though like it is a lifelong condition that can result in death. And often, you know, we are told that we can have shorter life expectancy. So it is quite stressful, and there has been times when I have gone to my pharmacy and they've kind of tried to limit the amount of medicines that I can take or have, which can be quite difficult. And also when I can't afford my medicine, there's been periods of time where I've had to like go without it, which has only just like kind of caused my condition to get worse.
As mentioned before, sickle cell is a chronic illness, but I personally don't see it spoken about as much in the chronic illness and invisible illness sort of groups as much as it should be. Do you feel like there should be more awareness surrounding this disease?
There is a community online, I feel like, especially on Instagram, who I've recently connected with, who kind of talk a lot on sickle cell. But I guess like a lot of people still don't know about it, like in the actual normal world, especially like when I apply for things like jobs, or even sometimes when I go to the hospital, there's a lot of medical professionals who still don't know what sickle cell is. And like I kind of said earlier, I do feel like that is because it mainly affects ethnic minorities, and you know, I feel like most people just don't educate themselves on sickle cell. So I do feel like more of that needs to kind of happen.
Right now, we're living in the middle of a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been a lot. That would be an understatement. How have you been managing during this time?
It's really, really scary time for sickle cell sufferers, I think. I feel like finally we're kind of starting to be recognised as vulnerable by like medical professionals, which is quite frustrating because I feel like there hasn't been a lot of support for the sickle cell community in the past. But obviously with sickle cell you do have low immune system, so you're more prone to catching infections, which I guess is why, you know, they're trying to support us more at the moment. So there is things to support us a little bit, like NHS vulnerable, and you know, a bit more support in terms of like getting our medications delivered to us and stuff like that. But I do feel like it's very hard because we can't go outside. We are on lockdown for longer periods of time. You know, I feel like it's definitely triggered me to have more anxiety, which has actually caused me to have more of a crisis. And just before kind of lockdown got really serious, I was in hospital kind of as they discovered what coronavirus was, and like that people were catching it when they started to enforce masks and stuff like that. And that was a really scary time for me because I was on wards where they wasn't sure if patients had coronavirus or not. And, you know, being admitted with sickle cell, and at the time I also had pneumonia, it was quite scary because I really feared for my life in terms of picking up the virus. And I feel like the hospital were also quite concerned. So I was discharged early, but because of that, I feel like I haven't fully recovered in terms of my health, as best as, you know, I would hope to be.
And I guess lastly, is there anything that you want people to know and people to find out about when it comes to sickle cell? Is there anything that you want to change?
So I definitely feel like, even though I mentioned it earlier, going back to like just being able to afford our medications and like sickle cell kind of being taken a lot more seriously by medical professionals would be really nice. Because, you know, it is a really serious condition, and because it's inherited, we didn't inflict that upon ourselves. So we have to live with this thing for all of our lives. And if we can't afford to necessarily pay to have our medication, then, you know, our life could be cut short. So that's a really important thing for me. And I feel like it's important for more people to just know what sickle cell is and be educated about it, I guess, especially like medical professionals, because sometimes, you know, when they're not sure, it can be quite frustrating when you're in a lot of pain and you're in the hospital and you're trying to explain to someone like what it is. So yeah, those are the main changes.
Thank you all so much for watching that video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please follow Dee, Dialectic Dee, on all of her social platforms. She's an incredible poet and a sickle cell advocate, and I think it's important to make sure that we are keeping in touch and following her work and talking about sickle cell more Also, a friend of mine last year for BBC created an amazing sickle cell film, so I'm going to link that in the description below, but that film was so dope, everyone wanted to watch it as well. It was for BBC Stories, so definitely give that a watch today. And lastly, thank you so much for watching that video. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video on all the social platforms. That's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, IGTV. Make sure you subscribe and follow You Look Okay to Me on those platforms. Also share the video around and turn on a notification bell so you can be made aware of whenever I upload a video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.